This podcast is a part of the Garnett Media Group podcast network. Garnett Media Group is the official partnership between student-run media outlets at the University of South Carolina. For more information on GMG podcasts or other student work, visit garnettmedia.org. Hi, my name is Dr. Jabari Evans, and welcome to Uncommon Knowledge, the podcast where we talk about all things spanning race and representation within mass media. This podcast is a partnership between the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of South Carolina and Garnett Media Group. So without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm your host, Dr. Jabari Evans, Assistant Professor of Race and Media at USC Columbia. For those of you who are new to this podcast, I'm grateful to have you join me as I talk with scholars, journalists, and media makers about their work as it concerns issues of race in journalism, new media, digital media, as well as mass communication. Today's guest is Maco Faniel, an academically trained historian who applies histories of racial justice and Black meaning making to the practice of racial and educational justice. And as the inaugural director of organizational learning and development at the Weisberg Foundation, Maco led racial justice learning for both staff and board to inform policy, practice, and philanthropy. Now, prior to working at the Weisberg Foundation, Maco led equity, inclusion, and justice-oriented leadership programming at the P.D. Green Program, an educational justice organization that recruits, trains, and places college and community volunteers as tutors in support of the educational goals of formerly incarcerated people. He now facilitates learning for courses focused on African American history, Black studies, and hip hop studies. He's done so at Prairie View as well as at Virginia Union University. Now, Maco is also the author of Hip Hop in Houston, The Origin and Legacy, which came out in 2013. And this book examines the history of Houston's hip hop culture. And in Houston, or in hip hop in Houston, rather, Maco explores the nature of Houston hip hop to discover how it came about, why it's notable, and what it reveals about the life experiences of young urban people growing up in the South during the 1980s. We're going to join this conversation somewhat already in progress. Maco is a good friend, a fraternity brother, and we had a very spirited conversation before he had to jet out and pick up his daughter from school. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Peace. But yeah, man, welcome to the pod, man. I think we've been talking about this for a while. I mean, clearly we've had a lot of conversation via social media. I think one of the best things about Twitter has been that, yes, it's a space where sometimes communication can go awry. It's also a space where sometimes the wrong message gets spread. But I think one of the things that that initial run of Twitter, particularly like what folks like to call Black Twitter, is I feel like it connected creatives, writers, thinkers, poets, community leaders, all types of Black folk that I think I sometimes call the intelligentsia, but like folks that needed to know each other but wouldn't have known each other necessarily existed if it weren't for certain platforms or
Right.
or maybe going to conferences. But like, some of that stuff that, where you have that connectivity, that connective tissue where you get to talk to folks all the time, or you get to see and share things that are going on in your everyday life where you're like, oh, I get that. I fuck with what he just said. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
you start realizing that people have more in common with you than even just occupation or musical taste or whatever. But like, you really start to feel like people. I feel like you're one of those brothers, especially talking about like the frat stuff and just being a fan of hip hop, thinking about sports, just the culture. And so, I applaud you just for, being a consistent voice in a crowded space.
Yeah.
And just thank you for giving me the time today to chat
No,
with you.
thank you. Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it's been beautiful watching your journey also. So uh I listened to your conversation with AD Carson
Yeah.
earlier today, and so I want to make sure that I don't do violence. And so I was gonna say it's been interesting to watch her journey from artist to scholar, but even as a as an artist, you are you know you are producing knowledge.
Yeah.
You're creating an episteme for, as we would say, for people to be able to understand like Black life during a particular
Mm.
time. So I really appreciate that. And
I mean,
yeah.
we're building this thing while we're flying it. For me, what I'm saying, like I only knew one way to do scholarship, and
Hmm.
when I initially, this is something we can go even deeper into, but like I think the academy for me was always kind of viewed for me through my parents, and I viewed
Hmm.
what they did as like rigorous work, empirical data,
Yeah.
research teams, grants, things of that
Yeah.
nature. And with that, I also kind of learned to be like, all right, well, to them, like hip hop and the stuff I was doing creatively was like, okay, well, this is what you do as an extracurricular. This isn't
Right.
a
Right. Right.
part
Right.
of your
Yeah.
academic thing. And so for a long time, I separated those two identities. And I think it took
Hmm.
me maybe until getting my master's that I
Hmm.
really started to like own my hip hop identity in academic spaces. Cause I
Yeah.
always, for some, I mean, and I'll ask you this, like, do you think that to a certain degree, until recently, hip hop studies was often like dominated by folks that I would say may not necessarily have been authentic to the spaces they were writing about.
Hmm.
And I think now we're seeing a generation of scholars who, you know, were authentically in the spaces that
Yeah.
they cover. And I think in many ways we're historians as much as we are thought leaders because we lived it, we're embedded in the culture, we're
Hmm.
embedded in some sub scene of it.
Yeah.
And I think that is sort of upset the older guard as well, where there's
Yeah.
like uh, a, a a checks and balances that has to occur within hip hop studies. What do you think about like the current state of hip hop in academia and sort of like how that is playing out in every discipline, not just
Yeah. Yeah.
necessarily, in African American studies or in music departments even, but like I think
Yeah.
across the board there's a generational kind of gap between those who kind of forefathered it in the 80s and 90s and those who were like kind of, I guess, digital natives.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, man. I have a lot of thoughts about this. So, 23 years ago,
Hmm.
I was enrolled in Introduction to Hip Hop Culture as a student with Dr.
Hmm.
Finney Coleman at Texas A&M University.
Mm.
Okay. So, like, I'm part of like the a generation of students who got an opportunity to take hip hop studies classes.
Yep.
And it's at a PWI, of course, which
Hmm.
most of them are, which
Yep.
is something else we have to talk about. So, I taught intro to hip hop studies last spring, and I taught intro to hip hop studies twice. I taught it twice at Virginia Union, and then
Hmm.
we taught a hip hop of the South, of course,
Okay.
the Virginia Union. I'm gonna say this. I actually don't know if I can teach hip hop studies anymore.
Mm.
I feel like I'm aged out of it.
Word.
That I don't know what. Um, so I did a hip hop symposium at Prairie View
Hmm.
last fall. Okay, and one of the things that I mentioned is that I invited many of the panelists, the people that came were, Gen Z, younger millennials who are currently writing about Houston hip hop or Texas hip hop. And I did that because I can't tell you about Houston hip hop right now outside of
Mm.
Toby Nwigwe or Meg Thee Stallion.
Right.
I'm 43. The music that I listen to is, the best album to me last year was Killer Mike's album. And
Hey, there's no
and
arguments there. It's
yeah,
it's up there. It's up there.
yeah,
If it ain't one, it's
yeah.
up there.
And so that means that the reason why it was one of my best is because sonically it was familiar
Mm.
to you know, my like where I'm at in life right now and my age and a
Mm-hmm.
parent and all these things or whatever. So I can't tell you about uh now, okay, if I tried, I can write about hip hop, current hip hop. Okay. So
Right.
if I sat down and did it, I mean there's a skill to it. But I
Yep.
can't tell you much about it. And so uh I cannot distinguish between, man, and I'm trying to do, I'm not doing violence when I say this. I can't distinguish between who the voices are, because the
Mm.
voices that when I turn on the radio, they all sound the same.
I
And
know,
so
right?
yeah, yeah.
We
And
start
so
saying.
yeah, it's I mean I sound old. So I can't like, so hip hop is still it's still living. And so when I teach about it, I like my entry points are different now
Right.
than the students that are there. And so like I can make the argument that like uh Southern hip hop has dominated like hip hop globally for the last 20 years. That is the sound of hip hop
Mm-hmm.
is like what can be Southern hip hop or whatever. But I don't know if hip hop is still regional.
Right.
And I don't know, like when young people are in your class, I don't know if they under like the work that it takes to help them understand space, place, region,
Mm-hmm.
locality, like
Mm-hmm.
is a lot, because we live in a provincialism. What I loved about Toby so much is that in a world that's gone global, when hip hop has gone global, at the time when he came out, like Toby was provincial. He was like Southwest A Leaf, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And so um so that's to say that like I don't know if, yeah, I think I'm too old in hip hop studies. I don't think you can make
Mm.
that you can so I mean I'm not in the like in the academy right now. I may be jumping back in, but I'm not in the academy right now. And
Okay.
so I don't know if it is very difficult, with the exception of a few, to be writing about hip hop your entire like
Yeah,
academic career,
that's real.
or to there are a few people that can do that. Uh but it's still a young person's game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. The people that I learned from are like Imani Perry,
Mm-hmm.
Greg Tate, Robin D.G. Kelly, Mark
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Hill, Murray Foreman.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
you know, I'm looking at my Trisha Rose.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, like these are the people that set a foundation for me understanding hip hop, and then I can get into the local from there.
Yep.
But I can name the people now, but I don't even know how, like, you know it would take. I feel like it would take some prep to get in there, like to find an entry point for students to be able to understand like this what we call the long durée
Yeah.
in history.
I mean, I couldn't have been more in unison with a lot of the things that you said. I mean, I found even in getting into the academy, I told myself, I wanted to study media. And I had a
Mhm,
conversation about this with um Craig Watkins, who's,
mhm,
at University of Texas. And, his words to me were like, your career will move sort of in chapters,
mhm,
but if you label yourself a hip hop scholar, then
mhm.
you've thrown yourself in a box that maybe is limiting. And
Right, right, right.
so he was like, just stick with the idea that you study media.
Mhm,
And through that, I think it's become less. And the other thing that I always said is like, I make lyrics. I've been in the culture, but I don't
mhm,
want to be one of these like rhetoricians who like looks at lyrics for
mhm.
my work.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
I was like, that's too much. It would attach hip hop to the tenure process a little
Right,
bit
right, right.
more than I want it. I
Yeah,
want hip hop to still be fun for
yeah,
me
yeah.
and pure for me. And so the way around it, I guess the workaround for me has been thinking about how young people pursue careers on a more
Mhm,
general note,
yeah.
how young people use social media. And so through that, I found that And it's odd. It's funny that you said like, you can't name some of the records. Through doing my hip hop class, I found that a lot of these young folks can't name the records either. That
Okay.
they find it through TikTok, that they find it through these platforms, but they don't even know the artists. They
Oh
know
wow.
they
Okay.
know the lyrics, but a lot of times they don't. I mean, don't get me wrong, they know the NBA
Yeah.
Young Boys and
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Yeah. Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
artists, 21 Savage, so on and so
Yeah.
on. There's
Yeah.
some artists that they like will identify for you as like we listen to this person, or
Hmm.
who's someone that's like kind of IDK was brought up. There's a few other people that were brought up like, okay, I
Yeah.
like this person, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for the most part, they're like, Dr. Evans, we just know what we like and we know
Yeah.
songs and we
Yeah. Yeah.
know what we use for our own, because they're putting songs in the background of their
Yeah.
content
Yeah.
and their
Yeah. Yeah.
posts
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
things like that. And so,
Yeah.
and they're having house parties. And so
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
know what they want to play, but they don't
Hmm.
really have the same connection to artists. And
Hmm.
that's because of the dematerialization of music, right? It's
Right.
just,
Right. Right. Right.
it's a playlist. It's just something I
Hmm.
do to work out. It's something I
Yeah.
do to
Yeah.
do my homework. It's something I
Hmm.
do to get through certain phases of my day. Whereas I think for us, maybe we still remember that time when it was material,
Hmm.
going into the store,
Hmm.
anticipating
Yep.
drops,
Yep. Yep.
and it,
Yep.
and it means a little bit. Even picking up the source of double XL
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
month,
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
meant
I mean, if you go
something.
back to the 80s, like looking at Jet
Like,
magazine and like them last couple of pages of Jets where they give you the top 20 hits, for the
yeah.
week or something like that. Yeah. But you just said something that reminded. So I have a 22-year-old.
Hmm.
He'll be 23 this May, and so my son was telling me. So I just bought a record player, okay, and
Hmm.
so he's at that age and also has like some knowledge that I don't have. He's a film
Mm,
like film studies, and
dope.
so he has some knowledge that I don't have, so I can ask him certain stuff. I was like, hey, what type of record player should I get? He told me, and then we were talking about physical media. So he was saying that
Mm,
he's about to invest into physical media
mm,
because if it's on a streaming platform that's owned by a big corporation, they can put it up or take it away. And I was
mm.
like, you know what? That's interesting. Because I
Yep.
remember years ago, he was like, why do you pay for Tidal? And I was like, well, you're an artist. Don't you want to get paid for your stuff? And so I just started buying. Man, I went to go dig in the crates like a couple of weeks ago. I was like, damn, like this is exhilarating. I understand like now like things that I read about like when DJs and
Hmm.
producers talk about digging in the crates. I mean, I found a Gap Band, Q's Juke Joint, Juke. I forgot the name of the title or whatever, but uh now I'm going back like I'm listening to like a full album again and
Mm,
what that felt like to listen to a full album and to like know deep catalogs of music and
yep.
where a project was made to tell a story. Like
Hmm.
there's a full it's thematic
Hmm.
uh and uh and it's telling a story. Like not everything is a single or produced for the radio. And I miss that. I'm trying to indoctrinate my 6-year-old daughter, and so I'm
Mm.
indoctrinating her with the music that I grew up on, so that
Right.
you know she'll be like 20 years old, be like, "Girl, what you know about that? You don't know nothing about
Yeah.
that." So yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I looked at something on YouTube the other day where it was kind of like, and this is sort of an aside where there's like the retro t-shirt thing that style
yeah, yeah, yeah.
is in, right? And there's this elementary school teacher just kind of I don't even might have been a junior high or a high school. I couldn't really tell. But just going through the halls, it's like, oh, you got a Public Enemy t-shirt on. It's like, can you name me one song by
Right,
Public
right, right.
Enemy?
Yeah, yeah,
Going
yeah,
to like, oh, you got an Aaliyah t-shirt on, you got a
yeah,
Tupac
yeah,
shirt on, you got a, and I'm saying like they went through about 7, 8 kids who had the shirt on, had no idea about
yeah,
any
yeah,
song in the catalog until it was one person who had like a Biggie shirt on who knew
yeah, yeah,
the record. But it just shows you that like I think we have this repository of imagery and icons that like have presence
yeah,
where like we know that their existence is important, but we don't
yeah,
necessarily really know the history of what they did. Like my
yeah.
son can wear Jordans, but he doesn't have the same connection to that Jordan
Right,
shoe
right, right, right,
that someone who watched Jordan play would have.
right,
You
right,
know what
right.
I
Yeah, yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it's just what it is.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
just the way it'll be. Or if I'm talking about Queen Latifah
Yeah.
during a week in my class, and I'm talking about like hip hop feminism, and she's a
Yeah. Yeah.
Grammy Award winning rapper, and they're just like,
Mhm.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, no, she's an actress, and she like had a
Yeah.
talk show at one
Talk
point,
show.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but like yeah, she's famous as hell, but like
Right. Right.
rapper, like I don't
Yeah. Yeah.
think
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
as hip hop culture, and so I think it's up to us, people like us to sort of bridge those gaps, but there's always going to be this, like, I call it gentrification of hip hop culture through like the internet, where
Yeah. Yeah.
things
Yeah.
just get lost in translation and turn into memes and turn into things that just aren't related to what they really were in the first place. Like,
Right.
you
Right.
know, I can ask a kid about Jordan crying meme, right? But do they know that that's from his like Hall of Fame speech, or
Right.
do
Right.
they
Right. Yeah.
know
Yeah.
like where it's
Yeah.
at?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't know where it's from. They just,
Right. Right. Right.
and so things like that, where my son, who isn't even into sports at
Yeah.
all, but
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
could tell you, he knows Nick Young's meme, right? He
Right.
he
Right. Right.
doesn't, but he's Swaggy Pete.
Right.
I
Right.
have
Right.
no
Right.
idea what that means to him.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
him, it's like, I don't
Yeah.
know what
Yeah.
that means, but I know that's who this is.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so I
Right.
think
Right.
our culture, internet culture, that's kind of the wave I've been on lately, has sort of gentrified hip hop culture. But I think one thing you were talking about, which is like space and place, and like I've been having these conversations as well, is like, is there a death of scenes that we as we knew them to be in hip hop? But you have, to me at least, a lot of expertise in the South and Southern hip hop, but more specifically in thinking about screw Houston hip hop, that whole
Mhm.
wave. And a lot of folks have sort of taken and appropriated from that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
scene. And I wonder, as someone who has an affinity for it, is rooted in that, how do you feel personally about like people sort of, I guess, borrowing, or I guess paying
Yeah.
homage to Houston in terms of utilizing certain aspects of the culture, or even the idea of hold the drink and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
screwing and chopping
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
production style, or just a lot of things that have been borrowed from Houston hip hop that have sort of made it a pop thing, or I guess even
Yeah. Yeah.
Beyonce sort of pushing certain,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
being authentic to the space as well.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Megan Thee
Yeah.
Stallion being authentic to the space as well. But I feel like, to an extent, the grills, there's a lot of
Mhm.
things that I think have, been extracted from Houston culture.
Yeah.
Um, how do you feel about that personally? But then also people who you've talked to, how do they kind of see this reappropriation of their culture?
Yeah.
Do they feel like they
So,
get the credit, or do they feel like iffy or funny
yeah.
about it, ambivalent?
Yeah. So, um, my feelings about it have changed, and so,
Okay.
my book came out. It'll be 11 years.
2013.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
2013, Hip Hop in Houston, came out, and so, at that time, I'm soon to be 33 a couple of weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
Conclave was in Houston
Oh shit.
that summer. So like I did a book talk and a book signing, and I had cash in my hand. I'm at the bar at the Hilton buying
Mm.
bruhs like Johnny Walker's, because I had cash on me. And so like when at that time I was more I'm an apologist for Houston hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
but I was really like an apologist. Like you couldn't say shit about Houston hip hop. And
Mm.
I've learned, so at that time I was like, man, people have taken our culture, they've appropriated, they don't give credit. Okay.
Mm.
I still believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand, I left, this book came out, and then I left to go to PhD program. So finished master's, went to go to PhD program. And so
Mm-hmm.
uh, I got exposed to more reading, more people or whatever. And I understood that all of this shit is an appropriation.
Right.
And
Mm.
so I think that all of it is an appropriation. Okay. So when we go to early Houston hip hop or just early scenes everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
there is these early artists are mimicking, so the original Ghetto Boys on Making Trouble, you know, they're
Mm.
dressed in like tougher than leather. You know, they are
Wow.
I mean, if you look at the album cover or whatever,
Yeah.
they're dressed like they're mimicking Run DMC, like the
Mm.
rapping or whatever. And so, I mean, Houston didn't really get many people argue that Houston didn't get its own sound until, you know, DJ Screw and the Screwed Up Click, you know. So this is,
Okay.
you know, a decade after you know, the original Ghetto Boys came out. And so
Right.
um so I think I understand that everything's an appropriation, okay? Some of the artists are don't like that because they're not getting credit. And I believe that uh people are making money off of
Mm.
something that they created. And so even, you know, we even have within the city,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you know, Chicago is huge and
Right.
Houston is huge. We even
Right.
have within the city, and I'm careful how I say this, that like the people who like Houston hip hop is the jargon of Houston hip hop, the flow is Lil
Mm-hmm.
Kiki's flow, you know. And
Mm.
so and there is this sound that's created, there's a screwed up click, there's a sound created by DJ Screw. Uh and then but the people that have made the most money off of it are
Aren't
from my
those
side of town.
right?
I'm from the north side of Houston, Texas.
Okay.
Slim Thug is
Yeah.
a year younger than
Yeah.
me. Paul Wall used to, you know, Paul Slayton used to come over to my high school. He used to carry a Bible all the time.
Uh.
Chamillionaire is north side. 50/50 Twin is one of my best friends. And so these are the people who like made the people that we knew.
Mm.
So we say 0405, okay? This uh still tipping,
Right.
okay?
Right. 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 Right.
So this
Was that
video is
Michael?
filmed.
That's Michael Watts and all of
So that's
them.
yeah, that's Swisher
Mm-hmm.
House. So
Uh-huh.
that's Mike Jones. He's from Acres Home and Greenspoint. That's Slim Thug. He's from Acres Homes and Homestead.
Mm.
And Paul Wall. And then another version had Chamillionaire. These guys are from the North Side, okay? And so we
Mm.
even within the city, there is this like they're making money off of something that, you know, another side of town created or whatever. So I think
Wow.
that's where the like the challenges come in. It's like we want credit, but also like credit in the marketplace means that you're getting paid
Right.
for what you created. Uh and so I was always amazed that when I left Texas, so my book is sold in the Netherlands. I mean, it's sold everywhere. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed like how many white folks love this music.
Mm.
I was amazed how far it spread.
Mm.
That like I taught in prisons in New Jersey, and like, you know, like when they found out I wrote a hip hop book and about Houston, they started like rapping some of the stuff. I was like, okay. And then you know, I didn't know how far Serp had went.
Mm.
You know, that was some shit that like when I was in high school, like I probably sipped Serp one time or whatever, like, you know, I'm the statute of limitations for my mama beat my ass is like
Experiment. A little bit
yeah,
of an
like
experiment.
I'm experimenting or whatever because I'm like, okay, let's do this. We're here about this new music or whatever. But like I didn't know like that they got so popular. I mean, they are manufacturing in certain places in Europe and even here. I mean, there is a brand
Yeah.
of drinks that are mimicking that. Okay.
It's
And so
crazy.
I so it still for me it speaks to the significance of Houston.
Mm.
Uh, but I think that this is the 50th. Like last year was the
Mm-hmm.
50th.
Right.
And what kind of got me upset last year is that 40% of the time that hip hop has been around, if we're going to 70, if we're using the 70s as the date,
Right.
Southern hip hop has uh dominated or been the sound.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we were commemorating uh we were still commemorating what I call the initial public offering. We were
Yes.
still we were still commemorating the initial public offering,
Yep.
and uh I felt like we know too much to be able to like to still be doing this.
Mm.
And yeah.
Because I remember, I mean, I right now I'm in South Carolina, clearly, so I'm close to Charlotte, but I'm also pretty close to Atlanta. And I
Hmm.
remember there was a point when a lot of Atlanta hip hop luminaries were saying, like, why aren't we getting together to do
Hmm.
something for the hip hop 50 or whatever? Because
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of it seemed really oriented either towards West Coast hip hop or oriented towards East Coast hip hop
Right, right.
or oriented towards like the legends, those who were
Hmm.
seen as pioneers. And really, that's like saying New York anyway. Like it's
Right, right,
really
right.
like going in that direction. But very similarly, I think a lot of folks, I started to study drill. That's sort of been like
Hmm.
something that's also been an entry point for me to think about a type of hip hop that isn't the type that I do,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it's still very native to where I'm from and is like
Right, right.
rooted in the culture. I think very similarly.
So is it from so the person that I know of drill that I
Uh-huh.
keep hearing about is Griselda. Now, that's New York?
Griselda is from Buffalo. They're from New York. They're
Okay.
from Buffalo, New York. I don't know if I would
Okay.
classify them as drill. I kind of put Griselda in that Wu-Tang uh I put them in that kind of category of lyricism.
Okay. Now is so does drill have a Chicago
But there
origin?
is, yes, drill has a
Okay.
Chicago origin.
Okay.
It's really to do a drill was really like that word in and of itself comes from Chicago gang culture. Like if
Okay.
you were going to bust a move to get some money, more than likely, or do some form of criminal activity, get down on your ops. That was
Yeah.
saying we doing a drill. It's a
Okay.
drill.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Um, Almost like it's a fire drill or it's a drill.
Okay.
We
Okay.
doing a
Okay.
drill,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
and
Okay.
and the music this sort of represented that lifestyle eventually started to be called drill music, but it never was that. It was really just certain artists would say in the songs, we doing a drill, or they say we drilling, or riding around, I'm drilling, I'm drilling. This is what they would put it in the song, but eventually like journalists started coining it
Okay.
drill music. And
Okay.
then Chief Keef happens, and then like
Okay. Okay.
that
Okay.
sort
Okay.
of makes it a bigger thing.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But
I
a
remember
lot of
Chief Keef.
what these guys are saying in these songs is very much like gang activity happening in real
Right. Right.
time, or like I'm speaking towards my ops. If you want something, I'll slide on y'all block and do something. If you want, this
Okay.
is my
Okay.
location. If you want to do something, come to our block, or
They do it. That's gang spirituals instead of Negro
yeah.
spirituals.
If
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody if
Yeah.
somebody just passed away, we gonna put it in a
Yeah. Yeah.
song and kind of allude
Okay.
to the
Okay.
fact that we happy that like we caught
Right.
dude lacking. Like that's another Chicago word
Okay.
that
Okay.
comes
Okay.
from
Okay.
drill culture, but ultimately, like what I found is those guys don't feel tied to the idea or the culture of hip hop. They see this as
Okay.
like I rap my life. I rap, but I'm not a
Okay.
part of this like hip hop in the park after dark, ball with a
All
ball,
right.
the bang, the dang, diggy. Like I'm not that. Like I'm just telling
Yeah.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
life. They don't feel
Yeah.
connected to this legacy of hip hop. They feel like this is a
Yeah. Yeah.
hustle.
Yeah.
It's a hustle for them,
Yeah.
and they're
Uh-huh.
connected to that. They're connected to the streets. They're connected to their block.
Okay.
They're connected to
Yeah.
their will to survive and their want to get money and their want to tell their story, but they don't feel so much
Yeah.
tied to like hip hop 50, which is why there weren't really any Chicago hip
Right. Right.
hop 50, like every now and then I saw somebody honor Twista, I saw
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
honor, but it wasn't a really a big deal. It was really
Yeah.
big on
Yeah.
the coast because
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
commemoration of their dominance, to your
Right. Right.
point.
Right. 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 Right.
Because if
Right.
we
Right.
want
Right.
to go all the way back and back in time and pull out all the legends that had visibility but didn't get paid,
Right.
a
Right.
lot of that is the East and the West Coast.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, to get back to Houston, though, one of the things I always loved about Houston, and we'll have to come back in because this is a 40-minute
Hmm.
call. We'll have to just hop back in on the same link. But the one thing I remember about Houston hip hop, and I remember this from my time as an artist, I performed at CMJ, and CMJ was like the college radio music conference, and it had a whole
Hmm.
bunch of artists performing, and it was kind of a place where you get to see and be seen, journalists, DJs, record labels, all of these people are here, and we performed on a crazy lineup that like was just a hodgepodge of music.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
like any college radio station, it was conscious rap, trap rap, party
yeah,
rap, any type of rap you could think of. And we performed with Trey the Truth. And I remember being backstage with Trey the Truth, and he said, "Y'all got merch?" He went to our merch table, bought one piece of every single item we had on the table.
yeah,
And we were like, "Yo, like, you sure you want to get all of this?" Like, he had never heard of us, never didn't even watch our show. He just said, "Yo, y'all boys cool. This how we do. You know, where I'm from, this how we do. We support each other. We
yeah,
go and we see y'all young brothers trying to make it. Y'all trying to do something positive, something productive, and we support." And
yeah.
I always looked
You
at,
cut off for a second.
oh man, my fault. So I was saying that Trey the Truth
Mhm.
bought one of everything at our merch table, and he was
Okay, okay.
telling me that like that's the way we do in our scene.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
support one another. Y'all positive. I don't have to hear your music. I didn't. He didn't even watch our show. He just was like,
Hmm.
was sharing a dressing room, and he was just like, man, I'm gonna support y'all boys because y'all
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I look to Houston as being one of those scenes, even more so than Atlanta. I would say Houston and the Bay Area as like more entrepreneurial and
Hmm.
more like, like we could get money just in our state and we don't
Yep,
even got a
yep,
tour.
yep, yep, yep.
And there's this like harkening back to what to me what feels like maybe uh a real civic duty to one's community, like you
Yeah,
even
yeah,
with like throwing of concerts. And
yeah,
to me, that resembles more of what hip hop was originally started to be, like the block parties, the food drives, the turkey giveaways,
yeah,
the
yeah,
the the um the concerts that give back to charity, the I'm
yeah, yeah,
selling out of the trunk,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
selling merch, the selling of grills, like
yeah,
everything
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
entrepreneurial and small business, even seeing like people owning restaurants, doing real
Hmm.
estate. I looked at that as like Houston people
Yeah,
put
yeah,
me on to that type of game. Even seeing like
yeah,
Chameleonaire now in the tech space. And
yeah.
um what do you think hip hop in terms of civic leadership uh means for marginalized communities, and how do you see Houston scene as being like vital to that legacy? Um,
Yeah, yeah. So we're going I'm gonna try to get this before we cut off. So
okay.
man, so I wrote an article about Scarface when he was running for mayor. I mean, I'm running for city council.
Mm,
It was on Talcum X's site that is not up anymore. But
okay.
some of what I was saying, some of what you were saying got edited out. And so
Mm,
that Scarface's uh desire to run for public office, I think fit within a the context and trajectory of Houston hip hoppers in terms of we have like Traded Truth and Mr. DJ Mr. Rogers. They
mm-hmm.
have something called the Relief Gang, and so when we had the hurricane in 20
Harvey.
yeah, Harvey, okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're going out, they're doing relief work, and then that created their whole nonprofit or whatever. They end up winning like an award or something about that. And then I mean it's local and you
Mm-hmm.
know, so Slim Thug names his album Already Platinum. His debut album with Pharrell, I'm Already Platinum. And
Mm-hmm.
it was really like I've already been a fucking millionaire
Yeah.
prior to hooking up with Pharrell and the Neptunes before this major label deal. And so I mean he even says this in his album. It says, people can't I said, man, fuck a deal or whatever. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and then he went back to being independent. He's still putting out albums. I mean, he had a good album last year or whatever. And so all like it's an independent nature of being like isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Like Texas is a Santa Ana created Texas as a state where you come, you bring your enslaved people with you. You come here, you
Mm-hmm.
start your business. You're gonna get some land or whatever. It's a speculator state. It's a paper. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you think about the Beverly Hillbillies that like we have oil and gas, energy, and so it's a place where you hustle. And so like I am trying to Yeah, so I'm gonna come back to that, but let me give you some context about Houston and kind of explain. So in Nelson George's books, Hip Hop Nation,
Mm-hmm.
when he was talking about like hip hop going regional, he used this word called systems of support. And so
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that made like Houston a significant center of hip hop culture then and continues is that we had major systems of support. And so the
Mm.
three that I talk about in hip hop in Houston was, we had these large nightclubs, okay? And so, we know this that the original way that you can hear music is not through your phone. It's like
Right.
the DJ is breaking music. And so the nightclubs in there, Nelson George called the Rhinestone Wrangler, the Gillies of Houston. I mean, the Gillies of hip hop. And so
Mm-hmm.
Gillies being the club that was featured in an Urban Cowboy that was in Beaumont, Texas. Okay, and so you're packing 1,300 people into this club like on multiple days a week or whatever. So you have these large nightclubs. You have this college radio station called Kids Jam,
Mm.
because as we know, hip hop is not on the radio every day until about 91. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have this large consumer market. So we have this Sound Waves that's by the Houston Astrodome, where Chris Martin, who we know as DJ Premier, is working there, and that's how that the connection from Sound Waves and I think it's Wild Pitch. What's the record label that he was on? Like gets him to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
so like people from Dallas, all the East Texas, people from Louisiana are having to come to Texas in order to purchase music. I mean, this is how also, the Screwed Up Click and Swisher House, they become like millionaires because you got like it's just a major like market. I mean, these
Mm-hmm.
cats are like, you can hear on a screw tape or a Swisher House tape, what's up, Bastrop? What's up, College Station? These are these small towns or these towns that they're going to and they're clubbing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a chitlin circuit within inside the state or whatever. And so they're
Mm-hmm.
hustling, they're making money. James Prince is independent. Russell Washington's Troy Burkett is independent. So it's just, everybody's independent. And it's like we can make this money here and it
Mm-hmm.
remains so. And it's a culture where we like we support each other. Bun B said something last year where Houston is one of the only like cultures where like the OGs get respect. Somebody from 30
Mm.
years ago is
Yep.
getting respect from
Yep.
somebody now.
Yep.
Whereas in other places they may be like, oh fuck that old nigga, who is he or whatever. And so
Mm.
um it's a place where you still get respect. And I think you kind of still get respect is because these people are still alive and they're gonna make sure that you are like there may be some enforcement around
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, I'll just say I'll
Yeah.
use that word, some enforcement
Yeah.
around respect. Yeah,
I was
yeah,
gonna say there's two things with that too. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
idea of like being home, making it at home and staying at home
Hmm.
means that you're present. So even if I don't necessarily mess with Kiki, right? I saw Kiki maybe firsthand drive down the block in his
Hmm.
cars, or
Yeah, yeah.
my dad or my uncles or someone is familiar with it, and it's like it's not just urban legend. I see it in my face.
Yeah.
I think there's that. I love the you know how to get around with your words, with the idea
'Cause
of
I had
respect.
so many images in my head,
Because
like,
immediately I'm thinking like, yeah, there's a goon culture
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know, like, and in hip hop entrepreneurship, there's this
yeah, yeah,
thing
yeah,
for me. It's like either your investor is a street guy or a
yeah, yeah,
Jew, and
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
what it is. It's like
Right, right,
one or
right.
the other, and I've seen that in every instance: conscious
Yeah, yeah,
rapper,
yeah,
gangster rapper,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
whatever, party rapper, sing song rapper.
yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
either some Jewish guy, and I get killed for this, but I feel like I could say this because there were two Jewish managers behind Kids in the Hall.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But then when we got with John Monopoly, I remember him being like, "Okay, for you to be stamped in Chicago, these street dudes is gonna back you,
Right, right,
and
right, 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 right.
when
Yeah,
we
yeah,
shooting videos in Chicago, is somebody got to protect us
yeah,
from
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
elements, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah,
who's your cosign, who
yeah,
gave you
yeah.
the right to who makes sure that you good, even in the hood
Hmm.
that you from,
Right,
what
right,
I'm
right,
saying,
right,
and
right.
so I see that there, but I the one thing I love about the Houston guys is unlike, when I hear someone like DJ Academic say none of these legends got any money and none of the guys got any paper.
Yeah.
The guys in Houston, they seem to have, for all of, maybe the lack of global recognition, they seem to all be straight and be living
Yeah.
like upper to middle class to upper middle class existences.
I mean, they
Um,
diversified their diversified what they do, but they're still performing.
mm,
And so they're still performing, and they're still, you know, I got one of my boys from high school is Kendrick James, and so Kendrick is still performing, and still,
mm,
he had Raheem Devon, and he got on his track. I mean, he's still performing, and I'm learning that he's like, oh yeah, my shit gets like my stuff gets streamed like
mm,
everywhere.
mm,
And I mean, I know you don't make that like streaming is one way, but you know, they're still making money, and they still like I want to like Bun B is one of the ambassadors for the Houston Rodeo. Uh it's basically I didn't think of it until a couple years ago, but it's a large music festival
mm.
designed around like cowboy culture, whatever. I mean it's huge.
Right.
And so he's one of the ambassadors for that. And there's always, I mean, for the last 3 years, there's been like a Houston hip hop a night or whatever. And so I want to get there because I want to listen to that.
Mm,
If A Ball, I mean, my not my favorite verses, but the verses that I was looking forward to was Ball and G versus UGK, and I'm
mm,
like, oh, this is these are familiar to me. And so I think that that's what Houston was one of the cities where I think it was about 2 years when Urban One had these like classic hip hop stations, and
mm-hmm,
Houston was one of the cities where there was a classic hip hop station. And so I think it's just one of those cultures uh, where you can thrive without having a with outside appeal or whatever.
mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, and I think that in and of itself, I for a while I think was envious of that when I saw it. Being on the road, you get to see things, and I saw that in Houston, I saw that in Oakland, I saw
yeah,
that to an extent in places like Nashville, St.
yeah, yeah,
Louis, uh, to a smaller extent, but I also saw it in Detroit,
yeah, yeah,
where like there's a subculture that has many different, I guess, styles, but on the public front, we all gonna get money
yeah, 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 yeah,
together.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Uh, I'm also thinking maybe that the whole idea of like rappers from the north getting, houses in places like Atlanta
hmm
and
yeah, 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 yeah,
Houston,
yeah, yeah,
the people from New Orleans migrating to
hmm
Houston after Katrina,
yeah, yeah,
um, gave another wrinkle to. It's a lot of folks from Chicago right now moving down
hmm
to Houston, where
yeah,
I
yeah,
the idea of no income tax is like
yeah, 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 yeah. No
very
state taxes. Yeah, 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 yeah,
appealing to folks. But I've always loved that thought, that there's this other black Mecca,
hmm
that doesn't get the same type of, I guess, credit or attention.
yeah,
And I feel like even though, Atlanta is a bastion for black entertainment and it's the black Hollywood, I always have felt that Houston in many ways um is insular and has this culture of self-sufficiency that
hmm
I've always admired.
yeah.
Um, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and I guess this harkens back to like this idea of listening to new people. This guy, Mexican OT, have you heard of him?
I'm assuming this is the guy that I've been on Twitter a lot, so I'm assuming this
Yeah,
is the guy that
he has
made
a song
reference to.
called Johnny Dang, and he
Okay, yeah, I don't know who he is. I think I've heard of it only because of that Johnny Dang, and also because there was a reference to Paul Wall, and somebody was like, "Who is Paul Wall?" or something like that. Yeah,
yes,
so
yes.
that's all I know.
He's interestingly sort of integrated. He wears a cowboy hat when you
Yeah, yeah,
started talking about that, and he identifies with this whole Tex-Mex
yeah, yeah.
culture. What can you say about kind of the Brown contribution to the hip hop scene in Houston?
Yeah,
if
so
anything?
Bun B said this a couple of months ago also that like Houston hip hop wouldn't be anything without uh 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 Hispanics. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, at 43 I know that there's diversity within Hispanics, but I went to college. I started college summer '98 from Houston, and so I thought everybody was Mexicans. And
Mm,
so to be like more like it's Mexican. I mean, I was like I thought everybody was Mexican, and
mm,
so but there's a diversity in there, and so these are they are participants and also consumers.
mm,
But there's also they like their own culture. I Houston is the most diverse city in the United States, but it's still segregated. But I went to school with Latinx folk,
mm.
Nigerians, Vietnamese, Chinese, Cambodian, black and white in various parts of my life or whatever. And I think that the Carlos Garza is the friend of Premier that works at Soundwaves that gets Premier to New York, and so you got South Park Mexican,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't know what happened to this dude. He was on the remix of um of a song on Bun B's Trill album.
Okay.
Aztec. Aztec was his name. And he
Mm.
was supposed to be like people's like, yeah, Jay-Z's trying to sign him. Da da da. I was like,
I
I've
think I
asking people
remember that.
like what happened to this dude? Like nothing happened to like what happened? But yeah, man. I mean, we party together, we hang out together.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed when I moved to Jersey is that this is a fucking segregated place. That
Mm.
like that they all these townships are their own. I mean, they stay ready to segregate the way they built the highway system.
Right.
So people talk about, oh, they're so racist in the South. I was like, we go to football games together. We eat in the same restaurants together. We, you know, um, sometimes we live in the same neighborhoods together.
Imagine play sports together too.
Yeah, yeah,
Things
we
like
play
that.
sports together
Yeah.
and all of that. And so, but I moved to Jersey. I'm like, this is like no. This is weird, man. Like y'all don't
Uh,
touch each other, in a lot of spaces. So that's the best I can answer that question. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I just asked, because I think that even in the midst of all this hip hop 50 stuff, there's also been a lack of, I guess, attribution to
Hmm.
uh the wider scope of
Yeah, yeah,
the spectrum of
yeah,
persons of
yeah,
color that were
yeah, yeah.
involved
I mean,
in.
there was no. I mean, Hip Hop 50 only focused on the MC
Yeah,
and the DJ.
yeah.
We don't get the other aspects. If you really want to talk, like we get the graphic arts and the physical arts or whatever.
Hmm.
You got Puerto Ricans. You got I mean, everybody has been involved in this. We
West
can't say that
Indians, yeah,
West, yeah,
West
West.
Indian
I mean,
culture,
yeah, West. All of that. Everybody is. You know, it's like Imani Perry. Says hip hop or rap music is like Black American expressive culture, or whatever. But
it is.
everybody has participated in this, and
Hmm.
white boys have been around. From the jump. So yeah.
And that's real. I mean, there's been an interesting dynamic in my hip hop class that I'm teaching right now. It's called Hip Hop Media and Society, but it's in a journalism school.
Hmm.
So we're talking quite a bit on how news media frames hip hop over the years, more
Hmm.
so than talking about, lyrics and songs and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But it's more about the iconic, I guess, the ways in which imagery, cultural artifacts, and media production has been centered around the culture and the styles within the culture, and how, you know what I mean, whether that's thinking about hyper masculinity, whether that's thinking about how the hood is framed
Hmm. Hmm.
as a space where authenticity of blackness lives. Like all of
Hmm.
that is kind of the things that we're exploring in this, watching
Yeah.
movies like Juice, Boys in the Hood, things of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, there is this narrow-mindedness in terms of, you know, folks like to talk about the male gaze or whatever in feminist studies, but I think there's a black male gaze
Hmm.
in hip hop, that if we really look at hip hop 50, we probably should, if we're gonna do it the way we've done it, it probably should have started with Sugar Hill Gang, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the point,
Yeah.
because we're
Yeah.
really thinking about it from an industry perspective. We're
Right. Right.
thinking
Right. Right.
about it from a who had hit records
Hmm.
perspective, who
Yeah. Yeah.
innovated in ways that kind of impacted in the
Yeah. Yeah.
industry, you know,
And then
and
that means we start with Sylvia Robinson. You know.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the first gatekeeping
Yeah. Yeah.
experience in
And
hip
and gang and
hop.
what was Joe? What was Joe's nickname? I mean, I know he was a hustler. So I mean, there we go. We have a goon. So yeah. So
You know, like that, to me, the way we're sort of viewing it, which is almost why I start to separate rap as its own, you know, I look at it as like rap music industry culture. Like that
mhm,
is its own thing.
yeah.
Yes, it overlaps with hip hop culture, but in many
Hmm.
ways, it's distinct and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
carved out its own thing over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was I about to ask you? Yes.
Hip
So
hustling man maladaptive.
yes, right. I mean, that's a bold statement in and of itself, but I would imagine too, though, that like you as someone who has done work inside of prisons, um, and has thought about mass incarceration, um, do you think that sort of this sort of hustle culture that's associated with hip hop sort of stems from this idea that mainstream, when I say mainstream, I mean more so like black respectability politics are unachievable to, or seemingly unachievable to some young folks growing up
Yeah.
in those
So
environments?
yeah. So this is where I go from it because so Lupe Fiasco has a song called "Hip Hop Saved My Life." Okay,
Yeah.
and supposedly he like listened to Slim Thug. He's talking about Slim Thug or whatever.
Hmm.
So I would say two things: history and hip hop saved my life. Okay, and now I'll take you to why I say this is maladaptive. And so um, I'm a black man who was once a black boy who grew up in Houston when Houston became a major staging location for the war on drugs. I'm
Hmm.
born 12 years after assassination of Martin Luther King. My mother was 4 years old when Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote the Moynihan Report. Okay,
Hmm.
and this particular report became uh, not only like our family policy within government, but it became the air that we breathe. Okay, and so what I'm currently working on, I'm writing a memoir about the unintended consequences of raising a generation of black men in fear that they would become failures. Okay,
Wow.
so I believe that hustle culture, which is like it's been the loudest voices have come through hip hop, are neoliberal responses to uh, to the loss of jobs, to the uh, exploitation, the inability to be able to like, the income gap, and also respectability, like respectability. So like I know how to hustle because I had to hustle, and hustling was a way for me to uh not become an ain't shit nigga. Okay, meaning that like, and I say it's maladaptive because of so many of us who come from social locations that we call the hood, men particularly, like pride ourselves on hustling as a part of our identity, where
Mm.
women become ancillary, where the only conversations that we can have is about money, where part of that, like part of becoming a hustler, I see this in Slim Thug. I mean, that
Mm,
like the way that he talks about his journey and the people that are still there, it's like I got mine, you get yours. And so the maladaptive part is that it was necessary to move from one social location to another social location, okay? Because we live in capitalism.
mm,
But my therapist asked me this question 3 years ago now. Who are you outside of your roles, your responsibilities, your callings, and purposes? I sat quiet for a
mm,
moment, started crying, and I said, shit, I don't know, because I have been trying not to be an ain't shit black man.
mm,
And so I've been hustling. And when like and now it's become like maladaptive because like that messes with your heart, that messes with how you see people, that like your interactions, your romantic interactions, your or what happens when the rug is pulled away from you. And so like that hyper focus on hustling and not like an identity be attached to hustling or an identity be attached to like making it, when those things are pulled apart, for me that creates suicidal ideations.
wow.
Like it creates like, and so I think that hip hop, rap music is comes out of a particular context, rises at a particular time. Jay-Z is the hustler story or whatever. But now I love that dude.
Mm,
10 years ago, it's like, man, I want to be like that. He's a businessman. I have no desire to be a billionaire now. Uh, because like, what will it cost me to do that? What will it cost my family? Who will I harm? And I want my like more black men to confront our relationships with hustling. Uh, because what I know now, working in philanthropy, that our individual hustling will never make up for the wealth gap that was created by extraction and plunder. So it will take 228 years for Black folks collectively to get the wealth that white people collectively have right now. And we're about to undergo the biggest transfer of wealth in like world history because baby
mm,
boomers are dying. And so we can't out hustle capitalism and white supremacy.
mm,
And in trying to do so, like we learned the lesson of John Henry. Like they're gonna build another machine that
mm,
can outdo us. And so like what does that mean? Like
mm.
how do we readjust from there? But yeah, that's where I'm at. I hope that made sense.
No, it makes tons of sense. I mean, I think these are some of these like theoretical, I guess, higher order things that I've been thinking about that and wrestling with in many different
Hmm.
conversations. And, I think with wisdom, I've sort of come to the space where everything I thought I knew, I don't know, right?
Hmm.
And what I've known to be the way it is or to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
normal. No, let's dig deeper into that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Push back
Yeah.
on some of that. Let's like investigate a little bit more. And I think, you know, being someone who, you know, A is the son of two therapists,
Hmm.
B did social work as a master's degree. I think a lot about like, well, how do we find strength in weakness, right? But
Right.
we can't identify weakness if we refuse to look at it. If we're
Yeah,
only
yeah.
thinking survival mode and and strength is very limited in our
Hmm.
viewpoint, if there's only a limited view of strength, then how are we going to progress? And how is this how, particularly for a game like rap or hip hop, where I like to say guys ain't necessarily wearing a mask, but they definitely had a armor on at all
Hmm.
times.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
How can we move? to where this thing is really progressing, or even like where a lot of the scholars who, we talked about being an undergrad. I took Dyson's class in
Yeah, yeah,
undergrad. And I remember thinking like all of these writings are about imaginaries of where the culture is going to be in 30 years. And we hear and it's like evolved, you know
right,
what I mean?
right. Yeah, yeah,
And I think simultaneously with that, I think the mental health or the mental um fortitude of some of our young brothers has also devolved. So these are
yeah,
just things that I'm trying to like wrestle with, and then wrestle with sort of how
yeah,
media plays a part in that, how
yeah,
rap and hip hop plays a role in that, and just, what's the way forward. I think you being a father, I being a father, I think you start to think in those terms when it's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
more
yeah,
generational,
yeah,
it's more about legacy. You start thinking about, well, what
yeah.
about my shit am I passing down?
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah,
shit
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
passed
yeah, yeah,
down to
yeah,
me?
yeah,
All of
yeah, yeah.
that, you know what I mean? But I'll say this before we go, because I love this conversation, but we running out of time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, 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 yeah.
I would ask you, like, what are some of the things that maybe you are thinking about in writing your next thing, the memoir, and kind of what do you look for that to do in the world? What is your goal for that project?
Man, I think it's about some healing.
Mm,
So when I think about reparation and abolition, so there's a like a structural uh win of what it would look like.
mm-hmm,
But then, like, what does it look like at the individual level? And I go back to, I'm always Baldwin has this and he has this letter to white people or something. It's called White Man's Guilt. It came out in
okay,
1965, Ebony
mm,
magazine after the riots, after the uprising. And so he talks about history uh, is about a confrontation with oneself. And so history has allowed me to confront narratives around Black wealth, income inequality, about Black masculinity, and that's so healing. I think
mm-hmm,
that when we talk about, I hear people talking about, man, I want to change the narrative. And now
mm-hmm,
I'm thinking like, we didn't create the narrative.
mm,
Or when I think about hustling, I imagine a world where if my abolitionist vision is a world where where people have what they need to be able to survive and thrive. And so hustling exists in an exploitive world. And so I imagine a world where,
mm-hmm,
we are free of exploitation. And I want to I want people to I want to make like black masculinity legible. I want to talk about I want people to understand what it means to be a hurt Black man.
mm,
I want people to understand like uh that the fears that produce the beatings produce trauma, and that most of us haven't even been began to grapple with.
mm,
And uh and I want to, like, my goal in raising my children. I mean, I have an adult child and I have a 6-year old, big ass gap. It's to like I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I raise free Black children? And and that is something that I question every day. You know,
mm,
for instance, and that I intellectually know that there's nothing wrong with my daughter shaking her butt.
mm,
I'm like, I don't have a body response like I used to have 2 years ago.
mm-hmm,
But when she first started doing it, I like any of my feminist politics went out the door.
mm-hmm,
It was like, stop shaking your ass, because like I know how the world's gonna view you as a Black girl. I know, like, she's doing it because shaking your butt is something, it's fun or whatever. Like, she doesn't like know. that is sexualized or that people will sexualize her or whatever. And so I am like, you know, trying to undo, like taking this learning that, I've been in these classrooms, had been in conversation, been in community with Black women, taking this learning and like, how do I apply this to my child so that she's free? So the rule now is, we co-parent. It's like, hey, you could do this at home, okay? Don't do this at school. It's different rules. And you're free to be who you are. Like I want her to be free to be who she is. And knowing what I know, and I want to be free to be who she is. And knowing what I know about hip hop, knowing what I know about history, I want to apply that so that it can create more freedom. They call history like a usable past that creates like interpersonal freedom, but then also freedom for uh for our progeny.
Mm, mm. Man, I mean, as you talking about all this stuff, man, a lot of this touches on a lot of spaces that I'm at mentally myself. I
Yeah,
can't wait to delve into this, hear more
yeah,
about it. Feel free to update me as you
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah,
move through that process, brother.
yeah.
And
What
you,
what is your hope for you know the transitions that you've made and where you're at right now? Like what is your work that you're doing, your scholarship you're doing, even this podcast? Like
mm,
what is your hope for how it translates in your partnership and your rearing of your children and things like that?
it's threefold, right? So I think it's cathartic.
Mm,
There's uses and gratifications in everything we do.
mm,
And for me, like ultimately being someone who comes from a space of doing something publicly, I'm used to instant gratification for
mm,
speaking my mind. And so I
mm,
needed to put myself in position
mm,
where the work that I do gave me some form of instant gratification the same way
mm,
getting on a stage gave me instant
mm.
gratification. So being
Right,
in the
right.
class every day, that does that. Writing, seeing my byline does that.
Mm,
The podcast more so is for me a way for me to continue conversations that I started to have during the pandemic.
mm,
Um, Conversations where at times you felt maybe you didn't have community right by you and not having
mm,
the opportunity to like go grab a drink with someone or go, be in real conferences or be in at concerts or be at places backstage situations, studio sessions where I would have these real conversations with people. And even as I started to move into academia, I picked brains. That's just
mm,
sort of what I just love to do. And I found that like instead of having conversations with folks and trying to force some form of collaboration, how about we just document the oral
mm,
history of these conversations that we
mm,
have together, and then that be the form of public scholarship that we take on.
mm,
And I think because I'm in the school of journalism, it allows for that type of creative scholarship to be more meaningful, or in this industry's terms, it counts, right?
right, right,
So,
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but yeah, it counts, but it also I don't gotta do it. It just
yeah,
makes
yeah,
me feel better to do it, right? And
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
there's no conversation that I've ever left, this one included, where I'm not feverishly having notes
yeah, yeah.
from what someone has said to me, things that I can take into the classroom or take into my own things that I'm writing and like add perspective to it.
Mm,
And I also like to highlight folks that I think are dope, and I think
yeah,
that's
yeah,
the other
yeah.
part is I think it's like these public conversations need to be
Mm,
had and etched in stone. Like you said, a lot of stuff ain't documented. I'm from the
mm,
blog era, and a lot of my
yeah.
mixtape shit ain't a lot
It's
ain't
gone.
nowhere to be
Yeah, yeah,
found.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
the
yeah,
parties we attended, the things we put on Z Share, the
yeah,
the
yeah.
the picture albums, the MySpace pages, all that
Mm-hmm,
is gone.
mm-hmm,
So I'm happy to see more podcasting happening
mm,
around the blog era and people talking about writing books about the blog era. I just
yeah,
talked to
yeah.
Taylor Crumpton about that. But
Yep,
like,
yep,
you know what I'm saying? Like that's the stuff that, you know, I want to play my role and play my part. And so yeah,
yeah.
that's what the vision
You
I
got to get
have.
Brandon Caldwell on. You got to reach out to Brandon Caldwell. He used to do day in a dream out of
For
Houston. And
sure.
so yeah.
For sure. I will,
Yeah.
man. Email me any information
I
with
will.
that, man. And yeah, man. No, I just, again, I've just been trying to have as many conversations as I can whenever I get the time. And your episode number 32.
Okay. Thank you.
And so, again, brother, thank you. Good Noop for
Yes, sir.
your
Yes, sir.
for your time, man. And I'm sure we'll connect in the near future, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Blessings
Uh,
to you and your family, and thank you very much for having me.
yes, sir. That's Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Dr. Jabari Evans signing off. Peace.
Peace.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating or review. And to catch the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at KnowledgeSense82 and on Twitter at KnowledgeSense82. Now that's different than how you normally would spell it. That's NALEDGE, Sense 82, as in 1982. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Peace.